Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're taking a look at another Yu Jing sectorial in White Banner. White Banner is a really fun, flexible, and effective sectorial for Yu Jing that a lot of new players tend to gravitate towards. It's got a great aesthetic, it's got a great story behind it, and really unique ways it can play and build lists. So before we get into the unit profiles, what are they about? White Banner have highly effective and cheap defensive options. Usually these are cheap ablative pieces that are annoying, not always hard to kill, but annoying to kill or annoying to get to, that really provide a great buffer for the list to ensure that first turn without negatively affecting the rest of the list when they're lost. They've got a huge amount of list diversity with a really big and varied roster of troops that all sort of excel in different roles and have a lot of different capabilities. And they've got very synergistic links. Links where different units can cover each other's backs. Very flexible links where you can put a lot of different pieces in there and make something work. And they generally have pretty high quality troops that excel in their roles, both in those links and really nice solo pieces as well. You've got a few drawbacks, though. You can easily build a list that heavily struggles against mimetism or enemy visors. You don't have many visors yourself, and mimetism can often put you on the back foot in a face-to-face engagement. And you yourself can rely a fair bit on mimetism to put gunfights in your direction. The faction has a lot of BS14, BS13 dudes that aren't putting any modifiers on your opponent, and who are susceptible from those modifiers coming back to bite you from the other side of the table. They've also got a bit of trouble engaging over 32 inches. You've got a lack of, say, sniper rifles, Feuerbachs, Thunderbolts, and can get outranged, offensively and defensively. Some things you really have to watch out for when making a White Banner list. In N4, White Banner really took the crown as Yu Jing's strongest sectorial by quite a wide margin. When they were stacked up to ISS, which at that point was very outdated, and Invincible Army, that was a very hard sectorial to get going. White Banner was the one that really stood out and drew in a lot of players from that as well. White Banner performed relatively well over the edition, and they got a really big boost with the reinforcements update at a really nice time when they'd begun falling off slightly when BS13 on its own started not quite becoming enough. And the reinforcements did a huge amount for the sectorial, and those ripples are still felt now where you're taking quite a lot of those reinforcements units. So, speaking of units, let's check them out. Alright, and here we are in Infinity Army 7 with the White Banner Army. Here we can see the Fireteam's chart, unlimited duos, 1 Haris and 1 Core. The first big Haris and Core option we have here is the Zhanchi Fireteam, where you need 1 Zhanchi. They've got Gudan, the Zhenshi Yiseng, who's the Doctor, and Chief Zhong as the keyworded Zhanshi models. Going quickly down to the wild cards, we can see there's no other Zhanshi units. And White Banner plays fairly differently to a lot of other armies, where, especially in the trends towards N5, you're not necessarily taking that big line troop core. And in a lot of White Banner lists, you can see them without any line troops at all. You've got really nice order batteries in other units that we'll get to a bit later. So this Zhenshi fire team can sometimes be, overlooked, underutilized a bit. You can fit 2 Shang-Ji in for the heavier armor, a Quishi, a Beast Hunter, and Octavia, who are all really nice options, as we'll see. But it's held back by the fact that it takes up a Haris or a Core slot, and usually the things that the Zhenshi team can bring to the field is not something the list necessarily wants or needs. Next up, we've got the White Banner fire teams, which can be a duo, Haris, or Core, and these are your main fire teams you're going to be using as the bread and butter of your list. You're needing either a Shang-Ji, Jujak, Yimao, or Yinshi, and they really form the core of the list. Usually you're basing, a big core around some glue like a Jujak or a Shang-Ji. Then you've got the kind of lighter mid-range options in the Yimao and Yinshi. They've got a really big list of other units that can join these teams. The Harang, Hetang, and Dakabai being big highlights, with Sergeant Quan, the Harang, and Bixie all giving nice keywords there that are quite impactful. Same thing in your wildcard section, where Li Gong and Qingao both have the Shang-Chi keyword, which comes in handy. Usually with the Jujaks counting as Shang-Chi, you can also make some pretty nice duos with a Shang-Chi and a Jujak, or two Shang-Chi and a Zhang-Ji and Bishi, and even some really nice cores and little duos centered on Jujaks. Sergeant Quan is quite nice these days, as are the Harangues, but we'll keep moving along for now. Next up, the Blue Wolf fire teams, where you can duo two Blue Wolves, which probably never happen. You've also got the option to duo a Blue Wolf and a Shang-Chi, or the Blue Wolf and any of these wild cards down here. Not really one that's used as much, but then, again, the Shaolin fire teams. These are the other bread and butter links in the list, where you can take a Shaolin Lian Kai, or as well you can take Jing Kuo with the Shaolin keyword, and there are some incredibly useful duos and Haris teams. Down the wild cards, you've got the Tian Gao, who's a really nice one to slap with a Blue Wolf if you're taking a Blue Wolf. You've got the Qing Gao, who's a great Shang-Chi, Jing Kuo just mentioned, and then Adil Crane Rank as a really useful and very flexible wild card. So now that we understand these fireteam options, let's take a look at our first troop in the Gudan. So the Gudan are some of the newer units to the sectorial and to Yu Jing in general, but have had quite a big effect. These are some of those cheap defensive units we mentioned in the intro, where you've got these camouflage forward deployment units with either a light shotgun and heavy flamethrower, or a submachine gun and zapper. Both of these profiles are quite good, with the way the game's trending, with defensively non-lethal weapons sort of being more the way to go. The zapper might draw your eye more, also saving a point, not too bad. And the submachine gun, I think, it's a pretty terrible gun, but kind of edges out the light shotgun in the active shooting. But that heavy flamethrower, it can do a similar job to the zapper against a lot of units, and is a lot better on the offensive side of things. So I think if you're really wanting the unit to double up in an offensive role, you probably go for the light shotgun heavy flamethrower. But if you're looking for that kind of pure defensive unit, submachine gun and zapper, it's not bad either. Usually what this Gudan is going to stop is it's going to be the last road bump before something scary hits your deployment zone, like a Norkius or a McMurrow. But what I've been finding a bit in those cases is the things you're really wanting to stop and you're scared of hitting your deployment zone tend to be able to dodge pretty well. So sometimes the Gudan aren't incredibly effective because all they're doing is needing to pass a dodge without a negative modifier. In the case where you don't have surprise attack or anything like that. But the shock mines are pretty handy there. If something runs by you, you can declare your short skill is dropping that mine. They might kill you, but then they have to kind of take another order to delay and take their time, or potentially mess up with that -3 dodging from those mines. They've also got a really nice FTO profile that has a keyword with the Zanshi. So you can put together, cores kind of just topping off with little Gudans to get up to those 4 and 5 man bonuses. Or even if you put, say a Zanshi hacker and a Shang-Chi Tinbot HMG to put that Tinbot on there, you can just chuck a Gudan on the end as a cheap way to get that duo bonus and also provide some really nice close range defense. So no matter in what capacity you're taking them in, the Gudan are really fantastic. Again, you're taking these camouflage for deployment ones in the defensive purpose, the FTO, trying to get those duo bonuses or get those bonuses up. But yeah, have a think about what you like between these two profiles. I think it is sort of a to-taste thing to some extent, but have a play around. They're really great. Alright, next up the Zanshi, and we discussed earlier how, a Zanshi core, it's not something you're going to take an incredible amount of time, you're not going to take an incredible amount of Zanshi. Really what you're looking at here is the Zanshi Hacker, 15 points for a Whip 13 Hacker. It's passable, but what makes the Zanshi Hacker very exciting is that it's quite easy to get a -6 Tinbot on the Zanshi. Past that, the way Link Team bonuses are these days, only getting up to maximum of BS12, you're not really going to be taking any of these defensive options. You've got much better defensive options that are less expensive and take less of an investment in, X amount of slots getting those link bonuses. And as for the paramedic's okay, but you've also got that linkable doctor in here as well. So with the Zanshi, I think really you're just looking at the hacker or the paramedic if you can't quite afford that doctor. The hacker is quite serviceable, as is the paramedic, but this isn't a Kestrel where you're taking a lot of your Fennec Fusiliers as very high quality line troops, or you're not an ISS where you've got a couple key profiles that you'll end up taking most games. The Zanshi really is a sometimes food, with a little bit of utility in the hacking profile and the paramedic profile as well. Alright, next up, the Tien Gao Orbital Activity Squad. These guys just have a huge list of, gobbledygook, to some extent, but they are one of your wild cards down here. So you've got some FTO options and some non-FTO options. I would never really go for any of the non-FTO options. They're just a bit wacky. I don't think they really do enough for the list. But I do think actually some of these FTO options are quite useful and a bit underutilized, especially when looking at something like a Blue Wolf duo. So first up, you've got this very basic combi rifle jammer profile and this boarding shotgun jammer profile. I'd always be looking at this one if you're looking to take any. So the boarding shotgun, it's a much more reliable weapon. You still get the jammer, it's a bit cheaper, and I love grenades. Fizz 10, I don't care, give me those grenades. But this is something that can go into, either a White Banner fire team, a Blue Wolf fire team, or even go in with these cores, and just stick a cheeky jammer where your opponent's not expecting it. Also, the Killer Hacker Tien Gao is, I think, your cheapest Killer Hacker, and he's a bit better than he looks on the tin, for a few reasons. First one is, he's a Whip 14 Killer Hacker, meaning you're usually zapping someone on 17s, which is really great. And he's also got Warhorse, which means he can't be isolated. This means that if you're killer hacking enemy regular hackers, the worst they can do to you is chuck out a Carbonite, which is quite easy to reset out of, and generally not as devastating as being isolated. So look, I think the Tien Gao, the boarding shotgun jammer, and the killer hacker combi rifle, two profiles that are maybe a little on the underutilized side. What I would say is that, when you are building White Banner lists, you've got a lot of build variety, but your list tends to fill up points and slots wise pretty quick. You've got a lot of pressure on your points in running big heavy infantry. You got a lot of pressure on your slots with the Shaolin monks, so you can't always make room for these guys. But I would encourage you, check out the killer hacker, check out the boarding shotgun jammer. Other profiles, probably don't need to worry about it. +1 burst EM carbines are hilarious, but BS12 probably just isn't enough to get there. Alright, the Zenshi is saying this is your Whip 13 Doctor. Getting those rerolls is really vital these days, with you not getting the double darts on the paramedics anymore. It links really well. The keyword's pretty impactful. Let's say you do slap together that Shang-Chi and Zanshi. You can just slap the Zanshi Yisheng on the end of that to get the duo bonus, get that Doctor. Really great for something like highly classified, to run a little Haris team like that can do quite a lot of classifieds. But yeah, the Zanshi is solid. You can also just run it as a solo piece with a little bot. Yeah, nothing much to say. Next up, the Mech Engineer. It's a bit disappointing that you can't link these guys in with the Zanshi. And with armed turrets kind of going a bit down, where they're no longer reloadable, deployable cover, I've really tried to find a use for, but never managed to set anything up decent. 14 point, just basic engineer. Fantastic. Nothing wrong there. Alright, next up, the Quishy State Empire tag. Support pilots. Of course, you got that tag com there. And you've got two good tags in the faction. The Blue Wolf and the Young Guija. Both good tags. The Blue Wolf, especially in its kind of very specialized role as a tag, really does well with these dodge and gizmo kit bonuses. Other than that, it's just a nice cheap light shotgun. It's fine in close combat. 10 points, nothing really wrong with it. If you're taking either of the tags, I think especially if you're taking the Blue Wolf, you do want the tag com. Otherwise, meh. Next up, Octavia Grimm's daughter, another unit who I think's a bit underrated. for the main reason that she's got combat instinct built into her profile and sixth sense just chilling on the side. So what this means is if you put her, say, as the top unit of a 5-man Zhanchi fire team, even though the fire team as a whole isn't getting that sixth sense, Octavia with the heavy rocket launcher already has it. And in that link, you've got on ARO, you've got a burst to BS-13 unit who really, within 32 inches, can engage incredibly well at any range. If they sneak under the heavy rocket launcher, you still don't want to get hit by a contender, which is a T2 save, and even past that you've got the heavy pistol. Furthermore, you've got courage and dogged, and 2 armor isn't nothing, which usually means you can stick around for, 1 or 2 more fights than another unit would be. And on active, burst 4 heavy rocket launcher, burst 4 contender, that's not bad at all. The main drawback is that you are having to invest in that big Zhanchi fire team. So what you might be doing is taking Octavia, a Zhanchi hacker, Zhanchi Yaseng, and then 2 Gudan. There are some lists where you can make that work. That can work pretty well. The missile launcher also isn't terrible, just being that BS attack +1 burst. Burst 3 missile launcher inactive can be pretty devastating, but I would be leaning more towards the heavy rocket launcher profile. Another cool unit to mess around with, very much a sometimes food though. Alright, then we've got Chief Engineer Zhong, who's another big blat of a profile, but has a keyword to go into the Zhanchi fire team. The K1 combi rifle profile I'm not a fan of at all, but I do like this profile here, mainly because it has an emitter, and hey, the AP marksman rifle, that's fine. Also has a similar dynamic where with the combi rifle, with the emitter, Chief Zhong can really engage at any range. The BS attack +1 burst is quite nice, bringing up to a burst 4 emitter. A good engineer is good. The faction generally runs a lot of things that can use engineering between heavy infantry, Dockaby, remotes. So Chief Zhong's quite good. Put him in the link. He'll go up to BS-13 with a burst 4 emitter. That's not bad at all, but 31 points, especially in today's Infinity, is quite expensive. I'm an advocate for him, but again, definitely a sometimes food. So in this first kind of big list of light infantry, the real standouts here that you're going to take most of the time are the Gudan troops. And then really, your list is more tilting towards, a lot of your warbands, a lot of your heavier infantry. This is not really a light infantry sectorial. War Corps is always fantastic, specialist at the moment too. Then we have the first of our reinforcements units in the Salyong Naval Operations Group. These guys really only go in the White Banner fire team, but don't really make a place for themselves. NCO isn't a skill you really have that much of in White Banner, despite kind of the greater Yu Jing theme of generally having pretty good structures for that. So if you're taking a Salyong, that usually means you're getting an extra order out of them with that NCO. Unfortunately, all their profiles and just the way they're built doesn't really go together very well. MSV1, is something pretty sought after generally in White Banner, where you don't have a huge amount of visors and can struggle against mimetism. But BS-12 just isn't enough to get you over the line. The multi-marksman, Red Fury, Thunderbolt, Emitter, all pretty good weapons, but they just don't have the BS to really make use of them. So I don't think I've ever seen a Salyong on the table. I don't think I've ever even put one in a list for exploration. Just don't really get across the line, unfortunately. Next up, the Silver Snakes Yin Shi unit. Most people have taken a quick look at these and then just said no. But I think these are actually a pretty decent unit in the context of White Banner. The main thing you've got here is having the albedo -6, and you'll remember in the intro we discussed that you can really struggle against enemy visors in certain builds, and you struggle to actually get an engagement that's putting an opponent heavily on the back foot, and the Silver Snakes are one of the only real units who can do that. So with that albedo 6, you can get, quite a good tilt on an enemy ARO piece with a visor. and you've got some really nice cheap profiles here. Uh, I would probably ignore these non-FTO profiles. The Sapper K1 Sniper and Emitter is quite cute, but I really wish it was linkable because otherwise that would be a very cool bit of design. But one die probably just isn't enough. So really, you're looking at these profiles here. The Yinshi FTO Specialist Operative with a boarding shotgun and emitter for 22 points, I think is a really good deal. Just 22 points with an emitter. As we discussed before, even struggling to engage over 32 is a weakness of the faction as well. If they've got, some kind of heavy rocket launcher up, you can outrange, get some emitters downrange. And then I think it's a bit of personal preference between the multi-marksman and K1 marksman. I think it depends what else is going on in your list. If you're going to struggle against heavy armor, or if you've brought, some of those bigger heavy rocket launchers, AP weapons, you're probably more looking at the multi-marksman rifle. But if you're only taking kind of those basic machine guns, that K1's really nice. EM carbine as well. I've been using quite a bit of EM carbines recently in ISS, and I found them to generally be of quite high value. You can chuck a quick duo of Silver Snakes together with this FTO boarding shotgun and one of the marksman rifles, and for not a lot of points, I think it's a pretty good duo. You know, you can slap a Dockerby on the end of that as well to get those picture bonuses. You can chuck a Harangue on the end of that to give you, that disco baller, some close movement. Uh, I think the Silver Snakes are maybe more valuable than they look on the surface, and I'd be really interested to see what people can get done with them. Next, another unit that I think's a bit underutilized is the Tiger Soldier. It's your faction's only drop troop, but it's quite a good one. Fizz 12 is fine, but Mimetism -3, BS 13, and Whip 14 on a parachutist just brings a lot to the table. We can see down here in profiles, you've got two quite good specialists in the Combi Rifle Light Flamethrower, Hacker, and Paramedic. The Hacker is really good. You're dropping a Whip 14 Hacker on the table that your opponent might not be prepared for if they think they've killed all your hackers. And where, Hacker is a very relevant button pressing bonus skill. Same with Paramedic if you're playing supplies. They're a really great unit to drop down, grab something, and go. With Combat Jump, they're still moving 6-4, which is quite quick. And a BS-13 Mim-3 Combi Rifle in your opponent's face, really effective. Having that light flamethrower is great. I'm a really big fan of the Tiger Soldiers. I think they get, taken a little less highly in White Banner, just because people come to White Banner for other reasons. But I think in certain missions, like Mind Wipe or supplies, Tiger Soldiers should be very heavily considered. They're great units. Next up, the Hundun Ambush unit. This is your hidden deployment. I guess ambush defensive unit that's sitting on the higher end of your defense. You've got a few profiles here. The multi-marksman rifle's interesting, having the visor, having the mimetism, but just too expensive and not quick enough to really be able to make an impact. The sniper rifle is fine, whatever, but really you want to take, for this much cheaper and much more effective heavy rocket launcher. We've all had an experience where you've been moving around the place, someone reveals a big template weapon and blows up a whole fire team. That's something the Hundun ambush unit can do quite well. That X-Visor is really nice to get that extra range. We've seen things like blink teams be really effective recently, and this is quite close to a blink team, just missing a bit of that extra mim, but hey, look, they're probably going to be dodging anyway if you're splashing a fire team like that. The Hundun, it's quite good. With the amount of camouflage you can put on the table as well, you can sort of obscure how many slots you've got on the table. And you can let the Hundun shine there, or you can line it up with something like a long ya, so that when someone tries to engage that long ya, you can pop out with that Hundun and really give them a tough decision. The Hundun, it is a bit fragile. Having that only Mim 3 instead of Mim 6 can lead it to where it can get blown off the table pretty easily. But hey, that Arm 3 sometimes clutches up. It's still a decent unit. Wouldn't fault you for taking it. Next up, the Yimou. I think the Yimou is another unit that isn't taken as often as it should be. And I'd say it's probably your best unit with a visor in faction that can engage at a decent range. You've got that BS-13, Multispectral Visor level 1, and Mimetism, so you've got that really good combination of stripping opponents' mods and imposing your mods on them, and Super Jump, which makes them extremely mobile. The main one you're looking at here is the AP Spitfire. Just a really great weapon, really great at winning gunfights and then confirming the kill as well, and having that boarding pistol is really nice. You can slap on, a killer hacker with the multi-rifle as well. They can jump up together, and then when the AP Spitfire dies, the killer hacker can cyber mask and run off somewhere, or just get dropped off. You can also slap Bixie onto the Yimou AP Spitfire as well. They're a great little duo for getting up the table and doing a lot of damage. But honestly, even just the Yimou Spitfire on his own, just left to his own devices, puts in a hell of a lot of work and can solve a lot of problems that the faction can commonly sort of stall out against. So a big fan of the Yimou. It comes in the starter set as well. So definitely a model you want to play a bit with, get on the table. That AP Spitfire is not going to disappoint. Next up, Jingquo. So Jingquo is one of the 2 units that has the Fireteam Master Shaolin that turns the other Shaolin monks regular. So it's really, you've got Jingquo and you've got Lian Kai. So Lian Kai, quite a good unit on his own, but Jingquo kind of takes a bit more utility and a different kind of utility. She has a BS-13, Move 6-2, CC-23 units with Martial Arts level 3, Mem -3, and no wound incapacitation, Spec Op, and Stealth. So in that mix, you've got... we should go over her weapons. A PS6 multi-rifle, which is quite deadly. A boarding pistol, which means she has a direct template, and quite a good APD ACC weapon. So Jingquo, in a way, is kind of a one-woman fire team, in the way that Kusanagi is, where she's a specialist operative, so she's bringing that specialist. She has a good close-range gun, so she's doing that, as well as having good martial arts. And that no wound incap and that shock immune means she can go a bit further than you might think. So usually what you're doing with Jingquo is you're stapling her with 2 Shaolin monks, and getting a pretty decent rate on points, giving her, a burst 4 multi-rifle like that, letting her move up under the Shaolin smoke, turning those regular. And I think between her and Lian Kai, she's probably my preferred unit to turn 2 other monks regular. I think Lian Kai is, quite good, but he generally wants to outpace the other monks, where Jingquo is working in a more synergistic way with those monks, and is still able to pull off, pretty comparable assaults now that Climbing Plus has been fixed. You've got Berserk as well, which still helps you close the gap, but generally a unit that can do a more varied set of things than Lian Kai. That being said, if you wanted to take Jingquo and Lian Kai in the same list, that's pretty sick. Just running, 3 to 5 monks with that, it's pretty sick. Not going to say no to that, but I do like Jingquo quite a bit. Alright, so we've kind of taken a look at this medium infantry, and what this medium infantry is doing for you is it's solving problems that the core of your list, which is the heavy infantry, can't. So that's in the Yimou, if they have a very oppressive, ARO piece with heavy mim, the Yimou can come in and solve that. If they've got an oppressive visor keeping you down, the Silver Snakes can solve that. If you need a quick button press, Tiger Soldier's there to get it done. Hundred's some really good defensive capability, and then Jingquo can make a really nice assault team. So even though you're not using much of this light infantry, mainly just using the Gudan troops for a bit of defensive leverage, you kind of go to your medium infantry, who are filling little gaps in your list and gaps in capability that your heavy infantry aren't able to get done. So with that being said, let's take a look at what really is going to end up being the core of your lists a lot of the time, which is the heavy infantry. First up, we've got the Shang-Ji, who are a big mess of skills, but essentially BS-13, tough guys with good movement and tactical awareness. So these guys can go in the White Banner fire teams, but can also make a guest appearance in the Zanchi fire teams. So in terms of the fire teams you're putting together outside of the monks, they're pretty ubiquitous. So the ones you really want to pay attention to here are the AP heavy machine gun profiles. One is your lieutenant, one is just a regular dude with a Timbot -6 and boarding pistol. the heavy rocket launcher light shotgun boarding pistol, which comes in at a really quite a low price for what they do, and then the hacker as well is quite a good pick. Now, the big thing holding back the Shang-Chi is that, as mentioned in the intro, they're just a BS-13 guy. They don't have mimetism, they're not seeing through visors, but they make up for some of that inefficiency by having that tactical awareness and being able to be the kind of center of a link. So you've got a couple heavy weapon profiles. The AP HMG is really nice as, one of the good AP weapons, where you're really looking to win against an opponent with weight of dice, and usually with decent armor, with, being able to link with good engineers and doctors, you can eventually make something happen there, even if it's not the most efficient. The tactical awareness kind of balances that out, and they can serve that role kind of with the Zhanshi team, giving that nice tin bot to a Zhanshi hacker. Maybe you've got a Zhanshi Yiseng there, or a Gudon kind of protecting that team as a whole. And then you've got the heavy rocket launcher, which is a really good cheap budget option as an offensive piece in a smaller team, or even just as, a quite solid ARO piece watching the center line. The Shang-Chi function really well kind of in a little Haris team with the Zhanshi. And the Shang-Chi also functions quite nicely just in little duos as well. You could take a Shang-Chi and AP heavy machine gun and a Shang-Chi hacker, and even though that's quite expensive, what that duo is getting you is a lot of wounds to chew through. They're bringing 4 orders to the table. They're going to be very mobile, be able to get the job done. Also, funny note, if you're taking them in a duo, your whole order jump gets you an inch further than just your walking, so they can jump quite far between each other, or just take those plus 2-inch dodges, trying to move up the board with Fizz 14. So they've got a lot of capability, even though they cost quite a lot. You can also team up a Shang-Chi AP heavy machine gun or heavy rocket launcher with Bixie as another very lightweight unit that can move quite well up the board. So they have a lot of very low weight duos that can serve, quite a nice role in the White Banner Fire teams, and then can really rock around with some smaller Zhanshi teams. But what I'm trying to say here is that the Shang-Chi, even though it's, suffers a bit from being BS-13, you're not running a big core of Shang-Chi. You're more using them in kind of smaller applications, providing synergy with other pieces in the list, where, something like that Tinbot Firewall comes in handy, as does number 2. So if you were wanting to run some Shang-Chi, I'd be looking at running the AP Heavy Machine Gun in a small team with Zhanshi to spread that Tinbot out, or in a small team with another Shang-Chi hacker, with Bixie, or with a Dokubai and, say, a Jujak to make that all work. Also, just a very nice, cheap heavy rocket launcher that can do a similar role. So even though the Shang-Chi aren't the rock stars that, they maybe used to be, I think they still do have a list. They do have a point in the list. And they do have, some useful points to slot in, even if they are a bit expensive. But on the point of expense, we'll see later with monks, you've got ways to generate a lot of relatively cheap orders, so cost isn't necessarily a massive deal. Next up, a pretty unique unit to White Banner, the Dao Fake Tactical Section, who are a camouflage infiltration unit with move 6-2, BS-13, Fizz 14, decent whip, and a couple wounds. And they're broken down into 2 categories here. You've got the AP Spitfire Specialist Operative, or you've got the PS6 multi-rifle with hacking device in a lieutenant and non-lieutenant capacity. Now, the Dao Fei, it's very much an archetype of a way to build a White Banner list, and either profile is quite useful. The AP Spitfire with infiltration usually means you're in a position to engage immediately, and it's one of the few units. Well, not one of the few units. It is one of the units that can, start the game quite easily by putting a negative modifier on your opponent without an incredible amount of setup, without needing to chuck down pictures and get spotlights or anything like that. You can put down a Dao Fei AP Spitfire as a, offensive reserve piece and immediately start engaging and solving problems, as well as pressing buttons. The hacker serves a similar role, and that they can kind of move up closer, do a bit more of that stuff. They're better on the objective play, but a PS6 multi-rifle is still quite deadly. And then you've got the lieutenant options. So lieutenant options in White Banner, they're a bit of a double-edged sword. As we saw with the Shang-Chi, he was one of your lieutenant options as well. You've got quite good kind of active brawler lieutenant options, but not so many lieutenant options that you're happy to just sort of sit around with and that sort of thing. But in terms of having a lieutenant who you can, make some moves with, can protect itself with a camo state, the Dauphin is pretty good, but again, kind of a list building archetype in itself. Uh, Even if you don't run them as the lieutenant option, I think the AP Spitfire is quite good. I think there's a unit we're going to see it pretty soon that probably outdoes the hacker non-lieutenant option. But if you want to run that hacker option as your lieutenant, I think that's a pretty good call. The Dauphin are quite cool. They've got great movement, good ways to engage the opponent, and get missions done as well. Great units. Next up, the Jujag. So these guys are going to be, commonly be the glue for your link, where you're using them as the center to put all these other more tasty units onto. And really, you're looking at a few options here. You're looking at the Engineer, or one of the two Tinbot -6 options. The Engineer's, great kind of in links with heavy infantry and units that want to be engineered. But then, the Tinbot -6, great little piece as well. Uh, Generally, it can be a bit of a coin flip which version you want in your list. I would usually say if you've got an engineer external to the link, stick with the Tinbot. But if you have no other engineers in your list, maybe look towards this engineer. If an enemy is going to go really hard hacking you, uh, they can spend a lot of orders doing that. But if you've got that engineer who can, within X amount of orders, kind of undo what your opponent's done, get the show back on the road faster than it took them to stop it, that's quite useful. But if you have an engineer that can do that uh, elsewhere in the list, having that firewall can just make it a fool's errand for your opponent to try and hack any link they're in. The missile launcher also has some, limited application. It's a cheap 2-wound BS-13 missile launcher that you can just slap on somewhere if you just need a bit of defense that way. Otherwise, I wouldn't really be looking at too many other profiles. But the Tinbots and the Engineer, really solid profiles. In terms of the Tinbots, I'd usually look at the Breaker Combi Rifle. That tends to synergize a bit more with the range bands of what else you're linking it with. But yeah, great unit. All right, next up, probably one of the rock stars of the faction, and one of the units that you rarely see left out of a White Banner list is the Hatay unit. And it all sort of comes down to one number, which is BS-14. He's really one of your better shots in the faction. He's also got Warhorse, which means that he can't be isolated. Arm 5, BTS-6, 2 wounds. He's a toughie with that tactical awareness as well. So it's usually hard, when you look at the Shang-Chi and then look at the Hatay, you can see why it's sometimes hard to justify a Shang-Chi if you don't already have a Hatay in the list, because they're bringing quite a lot. The most popular profile here is the BS Attack Guided, +1 burst heavy rocket launcher, which synergizes pretty well with some other units in the faction, like the Dockaby, that we'll get to later. But even, without the guided shenanigans, you're still BS-14, burst 4 heavy rocket launcher in a link. And yeah, you're quite a tough guy. The AP heavy machine gun also has its place as well. If you're just not really wanting to worry about the whole hacking thing, or you just need, a bit more armor cracking in the list, the AP heavy machine gun's quite good. I mean, look, that being said, usually the heavy rocket launcher, it's going to be stripping 3 armor, just from denying that armor cover bonus anyway. So it's really only if you're tag hunting. But yeah, look, the Hatay, really great unit. It's really hard to it's hard to understate how good this unit is. You're seeing it in most Yu Jing lists for White Banner. It serves as a really great offensive piece. It serves as a great defensive piece as well. It's one of the units you can feel relatively comfortable putting up, where you have Speedball, where you have Doctors, where it's 2 wounds with that hefty armor. It's a linchpin unit. I'd say it's a linchpin unit for the faction. And he kind of goes really well with the Dockaby, the next unit. who's your no wounding cap hacker, who goes in the same links that the Hatay goes in. So you can see it's got a few profiles here. The main one you're going to see most of the time is the killer hacker with upgrade spotlight with the picture. So you're putting it in a link to get that picture, to send that down range to killer hack things, and then spotlight things for the Hatay to then rain heavy rockets on if you can't see them, or just chuck down, zap some heads. Really great defensive hacking as well. Then it's got a couple of other profiles. One of them that's a regular hacker where you only have AVA 1 on the Dockerby, and you'd rather use it for that killer hacker. As we said before, you don't have a huge amount of killer hackers in the faction. And they've got the Mach 12 with deployable repeater, who, again, it's a very interesting model. He's a good backup gunfighter, but with AVA 1, he's just too valuable to not have pictures on. So you can already sort of paint a picture. You're getting a Timbot Neg 6 from the Jujak or the Shang-Chi. You've got the Hatay with that guided. And then you've got the Dockerby shooting out those pictures, getting those spotlights as well. And when he's in a link, he can, spotlighting has become less efficient than before, where your opponent's getting saves against them, etc. But with a Dockerby, the whole team can be moving, 6 inches, then spotlight, 6 inches, then spotlight. Takes the edge off of having to waste those, half skills on spotlights that maybe aren't connecting, or you're having to re-spotlight, that sort of thing. But yeah, the Dockerby, another linchpin unit. Most White Banner lists have a Dockerby in it, and they're probably right for doing so. Alright, now when we mentioned the Daofei Tactical Section Hacker, this is who I was talking about when I said maybe there's a unit that outclasses the non-LT option, and it's the Hack-Tau Special Unit. So the Hack-Tau, it's got a fantastic stat line. It's quick, 14s across the board, but it does start in your deployment zone, in hidden deployment or a camouflage state. In terms of loadout, it's got that same multi-rifle, but with better mimetism and better ballistics. So really it's going to be winning gunfights it's taking more effectively. And it's got, a template, as does the Daofei, but the big difference is you've got an upgrade trinity on the hacker. So the big drawback you've got is it's costing you an extra half SWIC, but, White Banner doesn't have a massive amount of SWIC pressure to begin with. But what you're getting over the Daofei is you're getting extra ballistics, you're getting extra mim, and you're getting a really big up in that trinity upgrade. So I think if you're running the Lieutenant's Daofei hacker, that's fantastic. But if you're running the non-lieutenant option, I'd really urge you to maybe take a look at the Hack-Tau instead. Fantastic unit. Alright, next up the Harangue, who's kind of in most of the all-star sort of cores that you're taking in the list. And they're kind of very forward offensive heavy infantry with dodge plus 2 inches, martial arts level 3, stealth, and immunity critical might seem a little strange and a little niche at first. But then you consider this unit is likely going to be getting into close combat, and that means it can survive quite well against other close combat units where their crits mean the Harangue's not going to be taking extra dice. A lot of the times when you have two units who are good in CC in close combat, it can sort of just be a coin flip to see who comes out on top. And with 2 wounds and immunity critical, it means the Harangue can afford to lose that coin flip at least once and probably keep kicking. The big one you're looking at here is the Deactivator with Disco Ball. So being a BS12 model, good range, you're usually looking at 15s, and you slot in really well in these links. And outside of the Harangue and the Shaolin Monks, you don't really have any vision control outside of that. And we talked about before how the faction can struggle against Visor AROs, and the Harangue's one way to sort of skirt that weakness and make sure you can get to where you need to go and control those lines of vision. But yeah, they do great in kind of a big core. They do great at kind of smaller strike teams. And explosive CC weapons really powerful. But yeah, really, you're looking at the Disco Baller profile. It's a huge upgrade from the Light Shotgun Panzerfaust. It's probably the best 1 point you can spend in White Banner, and that's saying a lot when thinking about the monks, but I think this is probably a little more important. And then the Thunderbolt, as a backup gun, it's really not terrible. It's not costing you Swick. It's not costing you many points. If you're taking a second harangue in a core or something and you just have a few points left over, the Thunderbolt really isn't bad. Other than that, the Cobby Rifle's funny, but probably not amazing. And this 19-point profile just gets so heavily outshined by the Disco Baller. Next up, Lei Gong. This guy is interesting, mainly for the reason that he's your only chain of command in the faction, in a faction that has really good brawler LTs who are likely going to be in harm's way. He's also got a parachutist option, but essentially this guy's a bit of a mess of skills that doesn't really come together in a cohesive unit that gets what you want for the points you put in it. The emitter, AP submachine gun, it's pretty okay. Same with the multi-marksman rifle. But I mean, you can probably find a better use for your points elsewhere. In terms of the parachutist, I think I'd much rather just take a Tiger Soldier. But yeah, I mean, look, the FTO options, they're not terrible. I think the multi-marksman gets kind of outdone by somebody else. These two profiles, they're fine, but it's paying a lot of points for what to back up an LT that's probably already pretty expensive. In terms of getting chain of command in the faction, I think it's more of a case of get good in White Banner, or you really don't want to be shelling out 35 points for a chain of command who's not fantastic. Flip side of that, Queen Gao, who's really one of your better lieutenant options. At kind of first glance, looks very much like a Shang-Chi, but without the AP and the other stuff. But he's got quite a bit going for him. The first is BS attack -3, which, again, one of the few units who can put a negative modifier on your opponent. BS attack -3, there's usually, unless you're playing against Morats, there's usually less warhorses in a faction than there are visors. So it's a little bit more valuable, than, say, mimetism, or very comparable to mimetism. He's got Warhorse himself, so he's not taking the neg-3 from BS attack -3. But more importantly, he can't be isolated. And then when you look at immunity immobilized, you realize, wait, this guy's a HI who can't realistically be hacked. The only thing that can really get him is a spotlight, and even then he's whip 14 with ECM hacker -3. So this guy's getting all the benefits of being a heavy infantry and having armor 5, which is huge, and those 2 wounds without really suffering any of the consequences. The heavy machine gun, even though it's just a heavy machine gun, it's still enough to get the job done against a lot of, light and medium infantry. You've got other heavy armor cracking weapons for some of the heavier guys if he can't quite muscle it himself. But he's a really great lieutenant. You can sort of treat him like a Shang-Chi in the way that you can chuck him with some smaller Zhanshi links. You can put him kind of in a larger White Banner link. Or even as a lieutenant using that lieutenant order, he's fine to just sort of do things on his own, use that lieutenant order. 4 dice is, usually going to be enough. And realistically, with the lieutenant order, he doesn't necessarily really need to leave the deployment zone or go too deep and get himself into trouble. But yeah, Captain Queen Gao, he's really one of the better lieutenants in the faction. I rate him pretty highly. Another pretty cool lieutenant, Imperial Agent Adil Mimwat. I've talked about him a bit in some other videos, but essentially he's another one-man fire team. AP continuous damage Spitfire is fantastic. Sensor is something you can lack a bit of in the faction. Then Spec Op, Stealth, Warhorse. Really great unit. He maybe doesn't fit as cleanly into White Banner as he does ISS. But yeah, he's still a great unit. Yeah, I mean, not too much of an incredible amount to be said about him. You're usually just running him as a solo piece in White Banner. Again, he doesn't fit fantastically into any of the links he can go into. You could maybe run him with a couple of Shaolin monks just to sort of yank them up the field, in the same way you would with, a big Quang Shi team. But, he's a one-man fire team. He can run around on his own. At the end of the day, he is still held back by just being a BS-13 dude. Alright, then Sergeant Quan, a unit who I think got a really big boost going from N4 to N5. You've picked up BS 14, BS attack SR -1, and mine layer, which is really nice as well. And really, I'm just looking at these multi-marksman rifle profiles with EM mines. With a multi-marksman rifle, you're getting that AP ammo in BS 14, and when you're in a link, you're essentially shooting a multi-Spitfire with the extra die, with the extra SR, uh, with BS 14, which again, one of the better and higher ballistic skills in the faction. It's not costing you SWIC either. So yeah, I really like Sergeant Quan. Mine laying an EM mine as well is really great with the little minefields you can set up kind of in and out of a deployment zone. Uh, she can be a bit awkward to fit where she can't be the basis of a fire team herself. It would be nice if you could, slap Sergeant Quan and say a harangue together, but you do need to take that Jujack or other unit to start that fire team, which is where it can get a bit clunky if it's taking up your hurry slot. But I quite like Sergeant Quan. I think she's got a decent bit going for her, and I would like to see her on the table a bit more. Love Sergeant Quan. Next up, Bishi. There's not much that needs to be said for Bishi, but she serves a pretty unique role in faction in hunting kind of other midfield skirmishers, where, we mentioned like Adil with his sensor, that's something you might lack, and she's just incredibly fast as well. She's got great jump, can go with the Yimao, and be really quick. White Banner is pretty good at generally clearing out enemy hackers with that pitcher, and once that's done, Bixie can really go in and make an absolute mess of things. She is expensive. 41 points, especially in N5, that's really expensive. But if you can extract the maximum value out of Bixie, she's going to more than pay for herself. I've seen a lot of activations of Bixie on a turn where when she's done, the game's essentially over. So if you can get good at running Bixie, you can really go to town. Again, NCO is a pretty valuable skill in White Banner, where usually you're not going to have an NCO on your list, and you don't always want to use that NCO order on your lieutenant to reveal who they are, or maybe it's just not a safe space, maybe they're in a link. So having that NCO is really nice. Can't say enough good about Bixie, especially now that Climbing Plus has been changed for the better. She's fantastic. You can run her solo, you can run her in a link. She's always going to get the work done. Alright, so we can kind of see after that what the core of your lists are. Really, you're kind of centered around the Jujack. The Jujack is the main glue of the list, where you can glue on a Hete, a Dokkaebi, other harangue to get that bonus die. Then you've kind of got the more on their own kind of rogue elements like the Daofei, like Captain Gao, like Crane Agent Adil Mamut, and even Bixie to some extent. But the core of your White Banner lists are really going to be centered around the Jujack and what links the Jujack can make around it. Next up, we've got your tags, who are both quite good. First up, the Guija has two profiles, one being your lieutenant, one not. And I've got nothing against a Lieutenant Guija. Lieutenant Guija is quite good. Now, what a Guija brings to the table is a BS-14 multi-heavy machine gun with tag, strength, and capabilities behind it, a heavy flamethrower, and also having a good enough CC skill that no one's going to want to run into combat with the Guija unless they're a big specialist. CC-22 Martial Arts Level 2 is kind of just enough to a good defensive threshold, where a very common way to kill a tag is just to run up on them with something like a Lian Kai, who can dodge that heavy flamethrower template, and then just execute the tag. The Guija having such high armor, having those 3 strength, and a DA PS3 weapon, the Guija can probably take 2 or 3 good hits from a CC specialist, where something taking that hit back, not going to necessarily survive. So another case where this, sort of like the harangue, you can afford to make a few mistakes, but when you get that hit back, it's not necessarily something your opponent's going to be able to afford. So that's where I see the CC stats sort of fitting in here. The other thing, having super jump, you're getting an 8-inch jump, and then doing something with that. And that's a bit of a buff from what we saw from the earlier Guija, especially now that super jumps, it's really good. 8 inches is really good. But the big deal, and I think the thing that's overlooked with the Guija, is a little ancillary remote down here. It has super jump as well, which means it's an 8-4 specialist and has the unique thing of being whip 13. Most of these other little ancillaries are only whip 11 or whip 12, but whip 13, it's a cut above the rest and just incredibly quick. So the first order I think you should be doing with your Guija always is jump and then chuck out that little ancillary remote unit. Is it the best specialist? No. Is it going to let you down sometimes? Absolutely. But the efficiency in getting to that objective in the first place, I think, can really make up for a lack of efficiency in getting that button done. And because there's no, because it's not a control, it's an ancillary, you're just passively moving that while the Guija is doing Guija things. So very high on the Guija. Also means when it's retreating, you can be kind of retreating with the Guija while pushing with the ancillary remote, pressing buttons. I think there's quite a lot going on with the Guija that I think can really be explored. I think the Guija is fantastic, but it is more from a White Coat perspective. However, I do think definitely has a place in White Banner and should probably see the table more. Alright, next up, the Blue Wolf Mongol Cavalry. A very unique tag that's essentially a super heavy infantry. You've got a +1 burst AP Spitfire with +1 damage, and then Berserk with, pretty passable melee stats that are happy to bully any other unit that doesn't have melee stats with a pretty hefty weapon. So this guy really benefits from getting the tag calm bonuses, where you're starting to dodge on a 16, and you're dodging +1 inch, which is really nice on that bigger S6 base. Also gizmo kitting a bit more, which is really fantastic. And you've also got a Whip 13 ancillary remote unit. The Blue Wolf, is really nice. You don't necessarily have a huge amount of brawlers in the faction, and the Blue Wolf can fill that role quite well. Also has some duos, which are decently interesting, but that does mean you can't really put out the Xingdao. So the tags, they're both interesting. Definitely both sometimes foods. I'm a little bit lower on the Blue Wolf this edition than I was maybe last edition. I think the Guija is in some ways a little bit overlooked. Let's take a look at your remotes. You've got the classic forward observer sensor bot. Nothing special in this faction. What is special is getting 3 TR bots. I can see you kind of building a list, with Evo hackers, with engineers, taking 2 Thunderbolt TR bots, taking a long Yar to really kind of gearing your defense kind of in the engineering way, where they're a faction that doesn't mind having an engineer around anyway. So I could see you kind of leaning more into that. Usually factions only get 1, so it's quite cool. You've got multiple. I think 3 is probably pushing it, but 2 is quite good. Next, the Sonbei Yikong. This one you're never really going to see for a couple reasons. First one is you can't link that BS attack +1 burst missile launcher. And the guided's, it's good, but you have the Hete, who's just bringing that capability with him, and essentially saving you that Swick, saving you those points. So if you're wanting to run guided, you can probably run it more efficiently, slots and points and Swick-wise, just off the Hete. Yep, 2 flash bots, it's nice. The Rushi, again, not really doing a huge amount for you in this faction. The MSV2 Spitfire is pretty interesting. You don't have any other MSV2, and you can give it that marksmanship to really put things, in your favor. But being unable to link it means it can be sort of inefficient in trying to do those things. If you're trying to set it up with that marksmanship, then it has to get there, then shoot. You've probably spent a pretty huge amount of orders getting it there, and then sort of, what now with the orders I have left. Same with the Luduan. The Luduan's pretty cool. It carries that MSV1, but not something you're necessarily interested in when it can't fit into any of your links. It's not playing into the efficiency or synergy of what the faction wants to do. Yao Zhao's a Yao Zhao. Pengling's quite good if you're taking Long Ya to refill its weapons, and also for the young Dokkaebi, refilling those pitchers. Other than that, nothing special, doesn't link. Then we get to the Long Ya, who's a unit that a lot of people are a bit down on at the moment, but I still think it's quite good. Essentially, you're looking at either of these cheaper options, where they've got the Panzerfaust +1 burst, Flammenspier +1 burst, submachine gun, and AP mines, and you're picking between a 16-point unit or a 17-point unit, half a Swick, from a mine layer. So these guys are camouflage, cheap units that are forming part of your defensive core. And I think the mistake some people make is putting them too far forward, where I think really you should be putting them as far back as you can, even if it means compromising the position of the mine somewhat if you're taking the mine layer profile. They're a unit that an opponent's probably going to feel pretty uncomfortable about just breaking into the open against. Or if they're in a fire team, that Flammenspier is really deadly. And a lot of good, kind of the better at Infinity you get, I think, the more risk averse you become. So when an opponent sees a long yaw there, it can influence their decision making to just make them go, okay, I just don't want to go that way. And you can put in some really interesting defensive setups where you can kind of lead your opponent along a line that you want them to go down just by putting out these sort of reverse carrots on sticks to then capitalize on, where you want their position to be at the end of the turn. Active turn as well. I think the long yaw are quite good. They pull off coordinated orders really, really well, and you can end up in situations with White Banner where you do end up being stuck, whether that's against a really good visor ARO or a really heavy, MIM ARO where you maybe can't get smoke in a position you want it to go to. The long yaw really quite good, but yeah, you want to put it back. You want to play conservatively. And I think the SMG also gets overlooked a little bit as well. If you can keep picking up your long yaw, even if they can't get reloaded, going, to the midfield, going on suppressive with that SMG can add another annoying road bump as well. So I quite like the long yaw. A lot of people kind of, saying it's the death. The Gudon's been the death of the long yaw. But the long yaw can really put that longer range pressure that can give your opponent more of a headache, can layer well with Hunduns. I think long yaw are fantastic. And yeah, have some great offensive capability that I don't think people are necessarily utilizing. All right. Next up, Guilang Skirmishers. So these really are your only, really good midfield specialists, where you're looking at a Whip 14 hacker with surprise attack on the hacking device. The combi rifle really isn't a bad gun to be shooting at with that MSV1. I've been able to catch out a lot of other skirmishers by discover shooting, usually on a 17, with that combi rifle. And the hacking's quite nice. Now, 31 points, it's really expensive. It doesn't feel great when you're list building, and it does feel expensive. But, sometimes they're the necessary evil your list needs. Also, good to mention the mine layer, having the deployable repeater or shock mine. That's really interesting. It's in some certain matchups, you can really put a line in the sand down on the center line. Mine laying that deployable repeater means you can get it in positions that can be really difficult for an opponent to run up on and tackle. And can really lock down some portion of the board for the majority of a game. Lieutenant options also good as well in things like decap or I think cutthroat, annihilation, that sort of thing. You just put your infiltrating lieutenant with camo just on the highest building you can anywhere on the board and say, best of luck with that. So the Guilang Skirmisher, they're serviceable. They're eminently serviceable in a faction where you don't necessarily have a huge amount of other options. Next up, the Salsa, who's a bit of a twist on the Guilang. You've got that one-use camouflage, you've got infiltration, you've got Mim 6, but you're sort of trading out a bit of your capabilities in terms of, shooting, etc., for some martial arts capability, which honestly, it's not a bad trade at all. You've got a killer hacker for 31 points, same points as the Guilang Skirmisher with that subgun, so you're still getting those hacker bonuses to button pressing. And having Mim 6 and a submachine gun, good defensive unit to put up, last turn of the game, put them up in suppressive over an important objective, can be pretty hard to shift. And the mine layer, being a zero swing mine layer, it's not terrible at all, especially because you get that deployable repeater down. And if you are wanting to do that deployable repeater sort of strategy, I would probably be looking at that Salsa Warrior first before looking at that Gwilling Skirmisher, especially because you still have the flexibility of the shock mine as well. But, with Berserk, with dodging 4 inches on a good number, you can sort of set what you can press a button that you need with the Salsa, or get those deployable repeaters down, and then just go and hack something up. They're not very survivable at all, but the goal really is to get a job done with them before they go. So I don't mind the Salsa at all. They're a good little mirror to the Guilang Skirmisher, but being AVA1, you're going to have lists where you're going to put both down. That being said, I haven't been incredibly impressed with the Salsa Warrior just yet, but I think they do have some capability. Next up, the Kunai Solution, who's had a bit of a glow up, quite a bit of a glow up. Really looking at the T2 Thunderbolt profile. I've been fielding it a fair bit in Whiteco and in ISS, and a T2 Thunderbolt with that MIM6 can really get results when your opponent's in the open. They're a good little mirror to the Hundun as well. If you don't quite have the Swick to put down on a Hundun heavy rocket launcher, I think the T2 Thunderbolt's quite a good alternative. The multi-sniper, I think I would rather just take the Hundun for that ability to splash onto everybody there. And the shock marksman rifle's interesting, but not something that White Banner needs. So the Thunderbolt, it's a great ARO piece. It's a great active piece as well. It can join a good long yaw coordinated order as well. And the Paramine, it's interesting. It's funny. Climbing Plus means they can reposition a lot easier now as well if you're going to put them on a very tall tower. But yeah, look, the Kunai's fine. Nothing wrong with it. It's a good mirror to the Hundun if you just need something slightly different out of that ambush slot. Then the Beast Hunter, who's a really fantastic unit for deploying in a camo state with super jump. You're really looking at the 17-point explosive weapon PS5 +1 burst. Now the Beast Hunter, it's not fantastic in close combat by any stretch of the imagination. You don't want to be taking on other CC units, even very basic CC units. Like if I was the Beast Hunter, I would maybe feel, pretty scared taking on the Guija. But against any, punk, line infantry, or heavy infantry that can't defend itself very well in close combat, the Beast Hunter's really just going to eat that for breakfast. You can also, run in and present a fork where you can either swing the explosive close combat weapon or just put down the heavy flamethrower. The Panzerfaust, it's pretty useful. And the Beast Hunter FTO can also sit in the Zhanchi fire team. Not that you're really going to be taking that fire team or putting the Beast Hunter in it, but that FTO Panzerfaust with MIM3 is perfectly fine. The other profiles, I'd never really take the TAC Bow profile. And if you're just taking that 15-point Faust profile, I would look really hard to get that 17-point profile. Really hard. Next up, the Shaolin Warrior Monks. And it's hard to... it's hard to undersell how valuable these guys are to the makeup of a White Banner list. You're usually taking a minimum of 2 monks, maybe even up to 4. If you're taking, a monk Haris, a monk duo, and then a loose monk. And these guys being 5 points each, while providing, just incredible value for the points you pay, with vision control, with a chain rifle, with stealth and really good close combat. The Shaolin Warrior Monks are fantastic. You've got this base, cost 5 profile with the shock CC weapon. It's really nice to get that DACC weapon if you can. But if you're linking them with, a Jing Kuo, you can probably get away with just the 5-point profile if you really strap to the points. I think this boarding shotgun profile, I don't know, not for me. Lian Kai's got a gun. So does Jing Kuo. I don't think you need to bring a monk with it, especially because you lose that DACC weapon. But I think one overlooked profile is this smoke grenade launcher. If you're running a full monk Haris, I think you should have one Shaolin monk with the DACC weapon, whoever your glue is, whether it's Jing Kuo or Lian Kai, and then this smoke grenade launcher. You're only BS10, but on 2 dice, you got a 75% chance of landing that smoke, and just having the flexibility to thunk that smoke out 24 inches across the board, it can either kind of extend your range to cover a different side of your deployment zone, or save you a lot of orders in getting that smoke in a key position where you don't have to be, walk, throw smoke, walk, throw smoke. You can skip having to make those big smoke corridors if you can land it further towards the unit who you're trying to block out. And for 0.5 SWIC in an army where you're not really spending all that much SWIC, I think it's a great piece as well. And that combi rifle is just a nice little cherry on top, a nice little bit of capability in the link. We've all seen a Morlock assault pistol just impetuous out, just randomly kill something because they've got burst advantage. And I think the Shaolin's in a pretty similar position there. So if you're making a full monk Haris, don't sleep on this smoke grenade launcher. Give it a shot. Trust me, you'll like it. Then Lian Kai. Whew, okay, this guy's a big mess of skills. All you really need to know is that he's got no incapacitation, super jump, stealth, berserk, a martial arts level 4 with Mim 3. Chain rifle, light shotgun, flash pulse. If you're engaging correctly with Lian Kai, your opponent's never really going to have a good kind of return arrow on him. If you guys watch my recent tournament report video, you can see Lian Kai, has killed a tag on his own. If your opponent leaves a lane open, he can just mulch a section of your opponent's deployment zone. There's not much that's going to stand up to that true martial arts 4 explosive PS4. He's absolutely outstanding. Also just dodging, on 16s is absolutely outstanding. That limited cover instead of no cover has also clutched up a bit for me in the past as well. Coming around the corner against another Warbandy type unit who can dodge the chain rifle or, coin flip with that CC attack, having that light shotgun, it's a really valuable asset. And I've had the armor from the cover save me on more than one occasion. I think Lian Kai, he's another real staple of the faction, and not one that should be overlooked. Last, we've got the Imperial Tactical Wing, who remains dogshit, if you'll excuse my French. He's not something the faction needs. You'd much rather just take Jing Kuo and some monks and get, a lot more out of those points. Yeah, just a pretty rough unit, can't be engineered, doesn't really do any damage per se, and in range bands that you've got covered really quite well. So, after taking a look at the unit list, let's take a look at some example lists. So this first one I've cooked up here is a nice little sampling platter of what you can expect to see in kind of different ways to go with your White Banner lists. First up, we've got a Jing Kuo and Shaolin Monk duo here, where Jing Kuo is getting that bonus with her multi-rifle, the Shaolin's regular and is throwing those smoke grenades a bit better, and they're generally providing a bit of synergy there. Now, if you play this link and you like it, you can always add another monk on there, make that your Haris slot. Or if you're not a huge fan of it, you could also just put Lian Kai in here as well, and run around with Lian Kai instead. You can shuffle some points around by replacing Jing Kuo with Lian Kai, but I'd really encourage people to give Jing Kuo a shot. Next up, the Beast Hunter, with that +1 burst CC weapon in the midfield. He's a great unit to just run out with and quickly make a play if you need it. You've got one Gudan to protect your deployment zone with the Zapper, and then you've kind of got a bit of an all-star core in the Hatay, Jujak, Doc, and Harang. So a core or a core composition like this is very common in White Banner. Gives you a good gunfighting piece. It gives you a really good hacker with pictures. A Vulcan shotgun. Vulcan shotguns are fantastic this edition. With a Timbot to cover both of these other units. And then the Harang, who's providing that duo bonus with the Jujak, with the Disco Baller, really good in CC, great unit. They've got a mech engineer with a Yao Zhao, which means that, we can enable this Jujak to be this firewall neg-6 Jujak instead of the engineer Jujak. Group 2 have got a little Haris team here of a Shangji lieutenant, a Zenshi hacker who's benefiting from this firewall, and then the Zenshi paramedic. Couldn't quite afford the doctor, but that's okay. Then 2 Longya mine layers and a Shaolin. So the goal of this little second group here, the Longya are providing your turn 1 defense along with your Gudan, where the Long Ya, they're unlikely to outright die with those multiple levels of unconsciousness, where they can be picked up by the mech engineer and keep on chugging. This list could run into a situation where it gets to an ARO piece it can't solve for. To get past that, the Dokubai can either throw out a pitcher, get that spotlight, get the Hete raining down, or the Shang-Chi can declare coordinated order with the Long Yas and really put down a very strong coordinated order, do something with its LT order, and then reform this link or whatever else. You also got a Shaolin Monk down here too. It's generally a good idea to have smoke capability in both of your groups, just in case, you exhaust all of one group or one group needs the support from the other group. You can make sure you've got that vision control there when you need it. So this is your first sort of sampling platter of a White Banner with some fairly standard compositions of kind of smaller links and units, filling the gaps with the defensive pieces and the Shaolin. This is, a good place to start with White Banner to understand what the factions kind of got going around for it, and a very easy list to make modifications to as well. So chop and change this one as you like. This is a good starting point. All right, next up, this one's a bit more silly. I'll be straight up with you. This one's a bit more silly, but also another sampling platter that's a nice way to experience the different things that White Banner has to offer. And this list is focused more around kind of that camouflage, that hacking game. We've kept the Beast Hunter, but now I've got the Hack Tau hacker with Trinity. Going to be a really fast moving piece, makes a big impact on games. And I've taken Li and Kai, the Shaolin monks, in a full Haris team, which is quite cool. So Li and Kai, even if you need him, sometimes you just need Li and Kai to be a missile. And in that case, at the start of your turn, he's going to be with these Shaolin monks. He's going to generate those regular orders. At that point, it's totally fine to just run off with Li and Kai, declare that super jump, break the team, and just get going. He doesn't always need to be stuck with these Shaolin monks. You should feel, pretty okay about breaking him off to go do his thing. You've got the regular orders, that's fine. So next up, we've got another Haris team here. That's technically your core slot. Where we've got the Yinshi multi-marksman EM carbine, the Yinshi boarding shotgun emitter, and the Dokubi, where these two are giving the Dokubi, that pitcher bonus, where those pitchers can be flung out. The Hack Tau can burn out anything that it hits, or brick some pieces. The Yinshi, both quite good. This one engaging at kind of the medium range, this one at your longer range, and the Pangolin to refill the docks. Repeaters. So at this point, you might be saying, okay, this is something, but we don't have anything deadly long range. That's where the Daofei is going to come in with the Lieutenant profile, starting in that midfield, being able to engage your enemy's ARO pieces immediately. Also carrying with him a Long Ya and a Hundun, who can put down another pretty nasty coordinated order if you need to. And of course, the Long Ya and Hundun providing your sort of turn one defense, along with having you might look at this list and go, well, where are the Gudan? With having so many kind of hidden units, it's sort of like, well, what would you be protecting with that Gudan? Really, it's just this little link here. The Shaolin link can really take care of themselves if a warband comes in. Everything else is kind of under some sort of camouflage or doesn't necessarily care. It's just this little Yinshi team. So this is a very different way of exploring White Banner. This is taking the approach of the more camouflage, more kind of hacking, indirect warfare sort of way that White Banner also excels at. But again, there's a lot going on here. You can chop and change a bit to make different sort of starting points, but this is just another avenue you can take White Banner. So with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed the video. Tell me what you think in the comments. Share your experiences with White Banner below. Be really keen to see them. And I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.